Hi V, hi everyone else, and welcome to Gaping Chasm. Today's video is really exciting. I have been working on this for like 2 weeks now, and I have literally the rest of the week set aside for filming and editing this video, and I am so excited for it. This is going to be the first in a 9-part series that I am doing about the children's show Code Lyoko, which was one of my absolute favorite shows as a child and still very near and dear in my heart. This show really helped shape me as a storyteller as well as just my imagination in general, and it's very formative. I'm going to, as part of the show, kind of go into what I love about it and why as much as I can, because I do think it's a show that's very much tinged by nostalgia in some ways, so it's going to be kind of difficult, I think, to verbalize what exactly I want to say about it in that regard. I'm very excited for this series of videos. Basically what's going to happen in every episode of this series is that I'm going to talk about some behind the scenes information about the show, talk about a set of specific episodes in the show, and then go in depth with a couple of those episodes, as well as just talk about the show in general and what works and what doesn't work. There's going to be 9 videos in this series because there are 4 seasons of the show plus a season of spin-off, and I basically cut every single season in half except for season 3, which is pretty short already. So this episode is just going to cover the first 13 episodes of season 1 of the show. Code Lyoko, like many children's adventure shows, has a pretty strict pattern to it. Every episode more or less follows this pattern, and the breaks and deviations from the pattern are really where the show shines. A lot of children's shows are like this, especially when they're longer runs. Exceptions to this would be like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and there aren't that many Avatar: The Last Airbenders. But basically the pattern that Code Lyoko follows is there is an A plot and a B plot. The A plot ties into Xana causing havoc in the real world, which means that the team has to get to Lyoko, the digital world, and deactivate Xana. And if you have never watched a show, that probably sounds insane what I've just said. So real quick, I'm going to try to run through what that means. First of all, there is the real world. Obviously, that's the art done in 2D animation. And then there is the digital world, Lyoko, which is done in 3D animation. Lyoko is housed on a supercomputer kept in a factory, and only our protagonists know about it. In Lyoko, there is a virus called Xana, who is somewhat sentient. I would say Xana is got AI-ness to him, but isn't like full-on artificial intelligence, because he does have limits to what he can do. And Xana can access the real world, often through electronics, but also sometimes will possess like living creatures. It's not really clear exactly how it works, just that Xana can access the real world and cause havoc there because Xana is trying to destroy the world, take over. Again, it's not 100% clear what his goal is, especially this early in the series. In order to deactivate Xana, our heroes have to go into Lyoko and help Aelita deactivate Xana, basically. Aelita is a girl who is in Lyoko, and we're going to talk a bit about her in like further in the episode, so I'm not going to go too much into her now. But she is the key basically to stopping Xana every episode. There are these things called towers, and when Xana is able to access the real world, he activates a tower. And Aelita is the only one who can go and deactivate the tower. So yes, that is basically how it works. And she deactivates the tower by putting in the code, which is Lyoko, which is where the title of the show comes from. Okay, I think that's all you really need to know. So that's the basicness of how the show works. And the show follows a pretty strict pattern of A story, B story, the A story being Xana affecting something in the real world that causes the Lyoko warriors to have to go into Lyoko and help Aelita deactivate the tower. And then the day is saved and time is actually reset so that nothing that happened happens. It like goes back however many hours. That's always the A plot, and then there's oftentimes, not always, but pretty much always, a B plot where one of our characters has gotten into some sort of messy situation, either because they've done something or because there are powers outside their control that have affected them to be put in a position they don't want to be put in, and by resetting time they're able to kind of go over and redo that. Yes, so that's the most basic pattern of the show. That's how it follows pretty much every episode, especially in season 1. As we get further into the seasons, you're going to see that there's a lot more variety to how the show plays with these key elements, but especially in the first half of season 1, it is a pretty strict, this is what happens storytelling. Code Lyoko is a French cartoon that began airing in France in 2003 and on Cartoon Network in the US in 2004. It was created by the group Moon Scoop, and during its run was able to get its entire storyline out, although Cartoon Network did not air the second half of the final season. So a lot of American viewers never actually got to see the conclusion of the show. Today you can actually watch the show. There's 2 ways you can watch it. It is free on YouTube in standard definition, which is how I have been watching it, and I strongly recommend because everything is on there in order and it's preserved pretty well. And then there's also on Amazon Prime, I believe you can watch the HD versions of the episodes. The idea for the show actually began as a short film called Garage Kids, which I will link below, and it is also available on YouTube. It is a weird little like seedling of the show. It's kind of cool, especially if you know that that's where it came from. It's not long. The animation is outdated, which is also kind of an issue with early episodes of the show, which we will talk about a little later. But Garage Kids is pretty cool. There's some major differences, such as they go to Xanadu, not Lyoko, and there's no Aelita. I believe Ulrich, Yumi, and Odd and Jeremy are all still in it, and I think Yumi is the newcomer to the group. I'll be honest, I didn't rewatch it before filming this because I've seen it several times in the past and I just didn't think I needed to. But it's more or less the same general concept as Lyoko, as Code Lyoko, and there are some elements that are actually used in the show and brought into Code Lyoko. I believe there are like direct images that are transferred over, so that's pretty cool. In 2012, Moonscoop brought the show back for a spin-off sequel called Code Lyoko Evolution, which, especially if you've seen the ending of the original run, is a little confusing that they would bring it back, because it really does wrap up the show when it ends. Code Lyoko Evolution is a little different from the original run. While it maintains the 3D CGI for Lyoko, the real-world stuff is actually live-action actors. And it's a little unnerving. I'll be honest, I haven't sat through the show. There's not an English dub. It's all subbed. It's all in French and it's all subbed, but it is available online and we will be covering it as the series progresses. So it'll be my first time watching the show. But even just looking at trailers, it's really hard to look at originally because it's hard to picture these characters as real live people a little bit. It's so much easier to see them animated, and it's, I feel like, kind of iconic the way that they're drawn. So seeing them as people is a bit odd, at least for me. But unfortunately, Code Lyoko Evolution ended up being cancelled after 1 season because Moonscoop filed for bankruptcy. And the show never finished, and it's never going to finish. And it's actually really sad, but as well loved as the show was, there are a lot of things surrounding the show that just never got finished or were canceled, such as a video game that was in the works for a while, and a book series that was only published in Italian. 2 things that in a later episode of this series I do want to talk about because I think it's really interesting, but right now I'm not going to dive into that. So this show shares quite a few similarities with another French cartoon that is very popular in the States, that cartoon being Miraculous Ladybug, which is a great show. And there are a lot of similarities. 1, they're both French cartoons. Yeah, so they're set in France, even though Code Lyoko tries to hide that a little bit. 2, they're both about kids being like superheroes secretly, which is not like just these shows, obviously. But 3, the fact that like there's kind of a reset at the end of every episode, and the structures of the show also work similarly. Yeah, there's some overlap, and people online have been quick to point it out. And it shouldn't be surprising that one of the storyboarders for season 1 of Code Lyoko is actually the creator of Miraculous Ladybug. So he did probably borrow some ideas from Lyoko, which is pretty cool. I like that there's that connection there. And I feel like, and I couldn't find anything to substantiate this, except I swear I read it or heard it at some point, and that is that there were more people who worked on Lyoko who ended up working on Miraculous Ladybug, but I can't verify that, so I could be completely wrong. The characters. I think this show is really strong in characters and in showing the subtleties between characters. We have 5 main protagonists. They're all like middle schoolers. I believe the age range is like 12 to 14, with Jeremy and Aelita being the younger two, and then Yumi being the oldest at 14. I can't verify this information though. I was checking the wikis and stuff, and the only character who we know the age of pretty concretely, and even that's kind of complicated, is Aelita. I know Yumi is supposed to be older than the group, and I'm pretty sure Jeremy and Aelita are the same age, and that seems to be everyone's consensus. So yes, this is a bit of speculation, but yes, Jeremy and Aelita are 12, Ulrich and Odd are 13, and Yumi is 14, is just kind of where we all sit at with assuming their ages. So who is everybody? First of all, we have Jeremy Belpois. He's the genius Einstein type character. He's a bit of a prodigy, super smart, great with computers. He's the one who actually originally finds the supercomputer and accidentally activates Santa and Aelita. Jeremy is driven a lot by his crush on Aelita. Like, he's infatuated with her, I'm not gonna lie. It's not creepy though. It actually works very well because they're both very sweet about it. Like, he just gets excited to be able to see her in real life kind of thing. He is also in general super interested by this stuff. This is definitely his forte. This is definitely something that is out of science fiction that he gets to play around with and deal with. Next we have Ulrich Stern. He is the... I don't really know how to describe him. He's the everyman type guy. Like, he's very likable. He's got kind of a bad boy flair. He does martial arts. He's like attractive within the universe of this show. He gives off like, and I can't elaborate on this, but like Jim Halpert vibes. So we're gonna leave it at that. Ulrich is probably the one who gets the most screen time in Lyoko. In Lyoko, Ulrich takes on a sort of samurai costume and has 2 swords. He's able to run very fast and also to create sort of like clones of himself, temporary clones of himself, which he's then able to use to both attack and to trick the monsters in Lyoko. Ulrich is also in a will they won't they kind of relationship with Yumi, and I'm gonna be real, the tension between them is great and one of the highlights of the show. I think that they bounce off each other really well. Before we can talk about Yumi though, I want to talk about Odd Della Robbia, who is Ulrich's roommate and another one of the Lyoko warriors. He is definitely the comic relief of the group, and about comedy, this whole show is very witty, very funny. I laugh aloud a lot, and it's got a very like dry sense of humor as well that just works so well with the characters and aged so well. Like, it's still very funny. In Lyoko, Odd is dressed up like a cat and he has laser arrows that he can fire. He does have a limit on how many laser arrows that he can fire, which is unique because neither Yumi nor Ulrich has sort of a limit on their fighting. I guess it kind of makes sense for Odd and his fighting style. He's much more cavalier with his life points and everything when he's in the game, so it works. He also temporarily has like a power of seeing the future, but that is... So it comes into play in a couple episodes, especially early on, but then the show completely drops it by the end of the season and just never talks about it again, which is for the best because it does not make sense for him to have that ability. Everything else is pretty much like you could be like, yes, a video game would have that, but it's not quite a video game. Like, it is like real life as well. He also, and I wanted to mention this because this is also sort of a character, he keeps a dog in the dorm named Kiwi. Kiwi is a bit of an open secret. Pretty much all the student body knows about it, and I mean, the dog is well cared for and given walks and everything. We're not going to talk about how inhumane it is to hide dogs in like college and stuff, but this dog is pretty well cared for. But dogs are not allowed on the school property, so the staff can't know about him, and that's actually like a pretty major plot point. Like, Kiwi gets into a lot of trouble and causes a lot of trouble, but you know, it works for the show. I will say Kiwi is probably the ugliest animated dog to ever exist. And I'm sorry for you Kiwi lovers out there, but he is just hideous. He's just hideous. And then we have Yumi Ishiyama. She is by and far my favorite character. She was not my favorite character when I was growing up watching this. That was odd. But watching it now, she's so badass and stone cold. Like, she keeps a switchblade on her. She's always doing like awesome stunts. Like, I love her so much. I wish she had more screen time, especially in Lyoko, because she's the character who gets the least amount of time in Lyoko. And I think in part because her as a character just doesn't want to be there constantly, whereas Odd, who gets the most screen time, is also probably the most eager to go to Lyoko. In Lyoko, Yumi is dressed up like a geisha, kind of. Later in the show, they all get costume changes, and hers is the one that changes most dramatically. But yes, early episodes, she's dressed up like a geisha. She also gets fans that are both defensive and offensive. Like, she can throw it and it works like a blade, and they are awesome weapons. She also has the ability of telekinesis while in Lyoko, and it works kind of. This has, especially in early episodes, because the CGI in Lyoko is not that great, the telekinesis looks very stupid. But as the show progresses, it definitely gets better and sleeker, which we're going to talk about the CGI and the glow up that it gets in a little bit. Yumi is also the most responsible of all the Lyoko warriors. A part of that is because she's older, I think, and she has more perspective. She's also the most mature. So when serious things are going down in the real world, she's often the first to say that they should go to the authorities or try to, you know, actually get people who are competent to help them. She's also the first to always suggest maybe they should just turn off Santa. She's not a cold person, but she looks at everything with a lens that, like, Jeremy doesn't. He's totally in love with Aelita, and he will not turn off the supercomputer. But Yumi is his counterpoint in a lot of ways. And because she's his counterpoint, the two actually have a lot of respect for one another, and Yumi, as the show progresses, actually learns enough to be able to run the supercomputer when Jeremy is not around and they need it. So they are pretty close characters. They actually have a lot of scenes together, just the two of them being friends, even though they have really conflicting ideas of what's important in some situations. And then there's Aelita. She is the girl who is in Lyoko, and she is so sweet. I think of all the voice actors, she's got my favorite voice actor. Like, the performance is just so angelic and perfect. Like, all the voice actors are pretty good, but she is like by and far my absolute favorite just performance on the show. Aelita is about as smart as Jeremy. Like, she's brilliant, especially with computers, and while in Lyoko, she's able to read information that's available on the internet, and she kind of learns and teaches herself about the real world. While Jeremy is also teaching her about the real world from the outside. And yeah, they're both really brilliant characters, and she's up there with him. She's been in the supercomputer forever, and yeah, that's all to say that. She's definitely integral to the show. She's kind of the beating heart of it, and in early episodes she doesn't get much in the way of character development or in offensive activities in Lyoko. She's almost always defenseless and helpless, which is really frustrating, but the show already within the first 13 episodes starts to move to give her more agency within Lyoko and more, you know, power within Lyoko, so that's something we're going to talk about in a minute as well. So then we have a couple more characters. They're side characters. They are kind of antagonistic, or if not antagonistic, they're just kind of problems more than anything else. There's not a huge cast of side characters in the show, which I think is one of the show's weak points. But it does do a pretty decent job with the side characters that it has. So first of all, we have Sissy. She's the daughter of the school principal. She's very spoiled. She's pretty mean, actually. She's like the bitchy student. She's very frustrating in a lot of ways because she, is pretty much always the problem in the B plot of the show. Sissy is driven both by her huge crush on Ulrich and also, and I think this is very important and actually more important than her crush on Ulrich, she's driven by her desire to want to be part of the friend group that our main characters are part of. Her current friends are Nicholas and Herb, or Herb, depending. I know it's Herb in French, and I think that some of the characters call him Herb in the American version as well, but in the American version he's technically listed as Herb. These are her two friends. They're both kind of losers, but they actually have, all three of them have a lot of depth to them. And I liked that they really actually let them be depicted as like regular kids in a lot of ways. Like Nicholas plays the drums. He's really good at it. You know, there's just like small things. The only other two students that we really get to meet in season 1 are Millie and Tamika. I think those are their names. I'm pretty sure. I always mess their names up. No. I think it's Millie and Tamia. These are two younger students who are also kind of interested in our main characters a bit. They run a sort of news broadcast show. They're the two sort of newspaper characters. They're always digging up the tea on everybody and they want to be the first to know everything, which sometimes causes issues. Actually, pretty much always causes issues. But I do like that this is like the driving force. Like they want to know what's going on. They're not in every episode. I personally find them as annoying as Sissy a lot of times, just because so many problems would not happen if they weren't like digging around for just like the truth, you know. So I find them a bit annoying, but they're not bad characters. And then there's Jim, the gym teacher. I've always loved that his name was Jim. It's like one of my favorite things. It's just like simple comedy that I love. He is also the comic relief of the show, as well as being one of the major authority figures. I love him so much. I don't even know how to describe him except to just show you a clip show of some of the funniest moments that he's spent.
Now you're sure, Jim, that this is your attacker? And you say he's an expert in martial arts. I think it would be better not to call the police.
Hey, Ulrich, you could have made a little effort. I don't believe how sloppy you look.
If Sissy's idea was to cause trouble, she's done a great job. Huh?
Would you guys need a slide trombone by any chance?
What's the matter? Don't you like it here, Jim?
I don't believe it. Oh, no! Hey, who let you guys up here? Trying to stop me from disconnecting the antenna?
Us? No, we were just passing by. Careful!
And yeah, that's the background that I think you need to really understand the show going forward. Yes, there was a lot. So I hope you took notes. So like I said, I watched 13 episodes to prepare for today. And I am probably going to be glancing down a couple times because I have quite a few notes and I want to talk about, at least briefly, all 13 episodes and kind of give you an idea of what happens in each episode. And then there are a couple episodes that I want to talk about specifically in depth because I think they're both really important to the show and just like really interesting episodes on their own. So without further ado, let's get started on episode 1, Teddy Godzilla. So in this episode, Millie and Tamia end up basically being humiliated by Sissy in front of Ulrich, who they're crushing on. And Millie runs and tells her teddy bear what she's upset about and how angry she is, and ends up leaving her teddy bear kind of like off to the side in like the greenhouse she'd been hiding in. Xana comes out and possesses the teddy bear and causes it to go on just like a rampage during the night of the school dance. So the Lyoko warriors get wind that Xana is doing something, and Odd heads to Lyoko where he and Aelita do help save the day while Yumi and Ulrich stay and try to evacuate people from the school dance. Episode 2, Seeing is Believing. So in this episode, the group decides to form a band, which the song they sing is super embarrassing and cringy, and I will be including it at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. So they decide to form a band with Yumi on vocals, Odd on guitar, and Ulrich on keyboard, I think. I'm gonna have to double check that. And they decide that they need a drummer. Sissy and her friends get wind of it, and Nicholas wants to be a drummer. This is the B plot of the show, and he's very good at drumming. And Yumi is like, we need him as a drummer, and Odd is like, no. And that's kind of the rift between the characters. Of course, they do make up by the end because they do get to sing a very cringy song. It's so bad. The meantime, Xana is collecting a bunch of power that he's going to unleash on a nuclear power plant and basically blow up the entire region. So yes, when the Lyoko warriors get wind of that, they head to the factory, and Ulrich and Odd end up going to Lyoko to help Aelita, while Yumi, and this is the first episode where she really gets to showcase that she is the rational one of the group. She tells them that she really thinks that they should go to the authorities because this is nuclear warfare basically. And Jeremy is like, no, we can't go to the authorities, Aelita. And she's like, we have to. And actually note about Aelita that I did not mention earlier. Aelita is very kind, and she is also a lot more rational than, Jeremy can be. She's also very self-sacrificing. So she ends up telling, like, multiple times throughout the series, she ends up giving up a lot to ensure that there's a good outcome, and it's very sweet. That's basically what happens. So Yumi does go to the authorities, even though, they know that if the authorities find out about it, they could shut down the supercomputer. They don't. No one believes Yumi, and I think this is actually really important for the show as it moves on, because it's just kind of like a science fiction story. It's hard to make adults and authorities believe that any of this is real, and that's going to be something that also makes it a reason for them not to go straight to like some major scientist. Like, why would he believe them? Episode 3, Holiday in a Fog. And this one, basically, it's about to be like spring break or something, and Jeremy decides that he wants to get detention on purpose to stay back at the school and can continue working both to materialize Aelita and keep track if anything happens with Xana. Sissy gets wind that the group is kind of planning something and figures out that Jeremy is trying to stay on campus on purpose, so she ends up also getting herself stuck there on purpose while the rest of the group leaves and goes home to do different things. Xana ends up possessing some like deadly fog. Again, this is like one of the things where I'm like, I'm not sure how it worked, but he does possess the fog and basically traps Sissy and Jim in a closet. Jeremy finds out that this is what Xana is doing, calls his friends, and Yumi and Odd are the two to get to go to Lyoko this time. They help save the day and, a reset, and yeah. There's really nothing that special about this episode. Episode 4, Logbook. This one was actually kind of fun. Basically, Sissy starts blackmailing Ulrich because she has found his diary, and she's blackmailing him into just hanging out with her and kind of being like her fake boyfriend. The group notices that he's acting weird, and they try to get down to it. They figure out what's going on, and they realize they have to get the diary back from Sissy because it has a lot of information about Lyoko and just everything, because obviously it's a diary. It's where he like vents. Anyway, Ulrich, Odd, and Sissy all end up on a bus that later gets taken over by Xana, but while they're on the bus, Yumi actually breaks into Sissy's room, steals her diary, and then does a little blackmail of herself to get Ulrich kind of free of her clutches. And it's a fun little B plot. Like I said though, Xana does take over the bus and plans to ram it into a like nuclear facility or atomic facility or something and like blow up the region, because you're gonna notice a trend. So, and then Yumi heads to Lyoko to help Aelita out, and they save the day like normal. This episode showed how cheap some of the 2D animation could be. At this point in the show, you have, not great 3D animation, but this episode really highlights that sometimes the 2D animation is also not up to snuff. Episode 5, Big Bug. This episode really highlighted how mean the group can actually be to Sissy. Like, she's not a nice character, she's a bully, and she's definitely one of the antagonists of the show, but she's still a kid. And they're all just very cruel to her. That's something that, like, as the show progresses, I do think that the characters start to acknowledge and try to stay away from, because there is an episode later on where Ulrich actually tells her that if they get out of a situation, he'll stop being so, like, mean to her. And I liked that, but this episode, yes, they're kind of horribly cruel to her. So basically the group plays a prank on Sissy where they make her think that Ulrich is actually interested in her, and then they kind of just laugh at her. Yeah, the prank ends up getting Kiwi, who is Odd's dog, found out, and Odd gets detention, and his dog is, taken away, or is going to be taken away. At the same time, Xana has taken control of 2 trains that are going to crash, and when they crash, a huge, like, deadly gas will kind of envelop the region, killing everybody. So they have to prevent that. Yumi and Ulrich go to Lyoko, but they actually both fail while there, so Odd has to sneak out of detention and end up in Lyoko. He helps Aelita save the day, same old, and then when they go back in time, they're able to sort of redo the prank. They still prank Sissy. Nothing changes except they just do it this time so that Kiwi isn't found out. It's still a cruel prank. Episode 6, Cruel Dilemma. This is one that I want to talk about in depth in a little bit because it's one of the episodes that I remembered really strongly from my childhood, and this is the first really angsty episode. I think there's a lot that we can take away from this episode and what it says about the show as a whole, so we're gonna just like put a pin in the details of it. But basically, Jeremy finally figures out a way to devirtualize Aelita, but it's done on accident, so he doesn't know how to replicate it. Before he's able to, though, Xana does attack, basically takes over some bulldozers, which are going to destroy the school. And so, of course, the group heads to Lyoko. While in Lyoko, Yumi accidentally falls into the digital sea, which is the, like, void around the different regions, and it's a permanent death if you do that. So she falls in. Yeah. They reset time and she's not there because permadeath even with the time reset. So Aelita and the rest of the group, but Aelita is the one who's like, Jeremy, just use the code for Yumi. And he does, and it's kind of heartbreaking. Either way, it's heartbreaking. But yeah, this is one of the better episodes in the first part of season 1, just plot-wise. It's very angsty, emotional. It really highlights the choices that the characters have to make. But like I said, we're going to talk about it in more depth in just a little bit. Episode 7, Image Problem. This is another one we're going to put a pin in a little bit, and also coincidentally, it's another one about Yumi. But what happens is this episode actually changes up the pattern of the episodes a little bit. It starts off with Yumi and Lyoko helping Aelita deactivate a tower, or trying to. It turns out that they can't find the tower. Yumi is devirtualized, brought back, you know, same old. But Yumi is acting really strange and not like herself, and she's super insistent on getting to the scanner room. They come to find out that Xana has created a fake Yumi and materialized her instead of the real Yumi. So Ulrich, Odd, and Aelita go to Lyoko. Well, Aelita's there, but Ulrich and Odd go to Lyoko to help Aelita, and they find Yumi is trapped in a prison called the Guardian. They have to free her. They do eventually free her, and by they, I mean Aelita does all the heavy lifting. In this episode, it's actually the first time that she really gets to do a lot of offensive stuff, and it is awesome. She sneaks around a bit. She basically saves Yumi. It's great. So, saves Yumi, who then basically tells Ulrich to just, like, kill her so that she can materialize and fight her clone self, which she does. They do deactivate the tower, and then time is reset before all of this happened. Episode 8, End of Tape. After 2 really strong episodes, this one's actually very disappointing. It's more of the same. The stakes are just and everything that's meant to sort of be a hurdle just doesn't actually feel like a hurdle. Basically, a famous film director comes to Caddick Academy and says he wants to film something in the nearby factory, which is obviously where the supercomputer is held, though that's in like a secret chamber underneath. So Ulrich, in an attempt to try to get the director not to film there, is like, oh, let me show you the factory, I know all about it. He tries to like point out all the horrible things, but the director's like, no, this makes it more realistic. And while the story in this episode is not great, I will say the director was hilarious and I loved the depiction of him. What a bigwig Hollywood director would be like. He eventually is like, yes, I do want to film here. Ulrich, why don't you be working on the set with me? And Ulrich's like, what? Yes, of course. And all his friends are actually really happy for him. I thought that was cute. In order to actually work on the set, though, he has to kind of make a deal with Sissy and her father that Sissy would also be acting in it. So the two of them end up at the like set in the factory with this director, and I'm just gonna like insert this clip here about like how kind of creepy it is and just like cut off from the rest of the world it is and uncomfortable. Yes.
During the shooting, it's forbidden to communicate with the outside world without Vincent's okay. That's so there are no leaks about the script or newspaper gossip. That's also why everyone sleeps here with guards at the entrance.
From above, right?
Apart from all that, it's a lot of fun.
As we could have all predicted, the monster that is like the monster robot thing that is brought on set to be the villain of the movie becomes possessed by Xana and starts hunting down our main characters. Odd goes to Lyoko, helps Aelita. Aelita does have to choose between 2 towers. She chooses correctly. The stakes are not that high. And yeah, time is reset. Everything is good. And this time Ulrich is able to, knowing what the director wants, be like, play into those fears and that way get the director not to want to film at the factory so nothing even happens in the first place. Episode 9, Satellite. This one was another really serious one and I actually quite liked it. This is also another one that I remember strongly from my childhood, so they must have played it a lot or something, because there's like the beginning is the part that I remember like the most, and not because it's like plot relevant, but I think just because it was played a lot. At the beginning, everyone is in class and all their cell phones go off, and because they're all dumb shits, they all answer their phones in class. Which is against school policy, which, you know, is understandable. So everyone has their cell phones taken away, which causes Cecily to protest, which is super French. The group eventually finds out that Xana is trying to take over a satellite that has a laser attached to it, because of course there's a laser satellite, and successfully does actually take over it before the episode is over. Ulrich and Odd head to Lyoko while the laser is like pinpointing on Yumi, and it's like chasing her around, and it is full on scary. Like, I was legitimately worried for her. They do a really good job of like drawing out the stakes in this episode, where some episodes really it has a hard time. This one, it does a really good job, and I was concerned for her and for Odd at a certain point. When he is dematerialized out of Lyoko, he goes and helps, or tries to help. You really can't help when you've got a laser like pointing at you from space. But yeah, Ulrich is able to help Aelita. They do save the day, time is reset, Xana doesn't get it, and they don't get their phones taken away either. Win-win! Episode 10, Girl of My Dreams. This is a really good episode that introduces a lot of information about Lyoko and what Aelita is doing there. So it shows us that her being in the towers actually rejuvenates her health points, as well as her being able to travel through the towers to different regions. I believe the humans are also able to travel through the towers, but I do believe they need Aelita with them. It was really nice to kind of get this touch of like, oh, this is what Lyoko is like when there's not havoc. I like these little, I don't know if they're like domestic touches, but like these just little touches about that kind of stuff. The real world plot of this, like the things that happen in this episode though, I wish they had more weight on the rest of the show. So what I mean by that is there's a character introduced in this episode who is then like dropped, and had they kept her in, she would have led such interesting complications. Like, I would have loved to have seen them, you know, run with this somehow. What happens is a new girl enrolls at their school who looks just like Aelita. Her name is Talia, and Jeremy is convinced that it is Aelita, she just has amnesia, and that somehow he managed to de-virtualize her without meaning to. He is convinced it's Aelita. The rest of the group is not so convinced. They think it's just a coincidence. But he does go so far as to bring her to the factory and be like, no, you are Aelita. Look, this is all this stuff and everything. Explains it to her. She, being not Aelita, actually thinks he's insane and ends up getting like the police involved. Aelita, though, on Lyoko is actually captured in one of those guardians, so hasn't been able to contact them. So good on Xana's part for figuring that out. Talia is actually just a regular girl who happens to look like Aelita and who is enrolled in their school. Obviously, when he figures out it's not Aelita, the group heads to Lyoko and they're trying to help her. But for actually, and this was pretty great, for the first time in the series, Jeremy is the one to actually do something really active in Lyoko. He doesn't go there, but he's able to create like a counter procedure in the game to free Aelita from the Guardian. And I really like that, because like Aelita, Aelita's a very like defense heavy character, but Jeremy is, you know, like helping them from the computer. He's not being like active in Lyoko. He does have like some offensive stuff that he'll do in the real world, like if he's attacked or if he's trying to prevent something. He's definitely an active character, but for the most part he does kind of like sit in the shadow. So I liked him being able to interact in this more direct way with Lyoko and to help save the day in this more direct way. But yes, they save the day, everything is reset, same old ending. And you know, this time they don't actually try to harass Talia. They're just like, oh, that's Talia, she's a new girl, she just happens to look like Aelita, and she never comes back again. That's it. That's all for Talia. I liked that they were trying to add more characters, but I wish they could have kept them somehow. Obviously, Talia would have complicated things. She does look just like Aelita, but I don't know. It would have been really an interesting complication. And I'm not going to spoil things that happen later in the show. Like, I do remember quite a bit of Aelita's storyline as the show progresses, and I think they could have, you know, knit Talia into that plot somehow. But, you know, decisions were made and she disappears and is not even mentioned ever again after this episode. And this is not the first character that happens with. Just the first so far. Episode 11, Plagued. This was the most full feeling episode so far. if you've noticed, these last couple episodes have all been like really strong, and it is like a pretty strong lead up into the like mid-season. But this one is definitely one of the strongest. It has it's one of the scariest too, just like on like the primal fear kind of thing. Basically, and I'm not sure how it works, but Xana is able to possess rats, and then they like bite each other and they become like zombie Xana rats. And these rats are the ones attacking everyone. All the Lyoko warriors end up like cornered. They do eventually escape from like the roof and they get to Lyoko, are able to save the day, but a lot of the episode is set pre-Lyoko and feels like action-packed and just really flush. Jeremy at the same time, he's actually told, because he is a prodigy, he's being told that they think he's better than what Caddick can offer, and so they're giving him like a genius test to see if he should like go to a different school, which he's super sad about. It is so sad. There's a scene where the group is like, oh no, Jeremy, you can't leave. How will we go to Lyoko? What about Xana? And Jeremy's just like, well, yeah, but also I don't want to leave because you guys are my friends. And it's so just like, my heart. After they're able to reset time, he is able to like flunk it. But in Lyoko, in order to fight Xana, this is actually one of the better like fight sequences so far. It's more action-packed, more exciting, and yeah, all around this episode was just great. Episode 12, Swarming Attack. There's almost nothing to talk about with this episode. It is very similar to the last one in that Xana basically possesses a bunch of wasps, and the wasps attack, and they go into Lyoko and save the day. The only like somewhat interesting thing is the B plot, which is that Sissy basically plays a prank on Ulrich that is making him think that Yumi has sent him a love letter. I don't know why that was hard to get out. And he's kind of like wallowing the entire episode because he has a huge crush on her, but he's not sure if he's ready to say anything, and then he finds out that she didn't write the letter and he's like a little bit heartbroken. Very, very teenage angsty, but also just kind of frustrating because he's a little bit out of commission for a while. Because he's just like very emotional about the whole thing. Episode 13, Just in Time. This is the mid-season, or the unofficial mid-season finale, on where I'm stopping with like how many episodes I'm watching for this video. This one is by and far the best written, the best animated, and just all around the most competent episode up to this point, which is good. It feels like they definitely poured a lot into a really good mid-season finale, so I'm not gonna complain. Like, I love it. And this is one that I want to talk about more in depth as well. I think it's just a fantastic episode, and I think it showcases everything that the show gets right and everything that I love about the show. So, Jeremy is finally able to materialize Aelita, kind of. He's able to materialize a single strand of her hair, which has her genetic / code in it. So he's very excited about it and plans to materialize the entirety of her. And when he tries to materialize the entirety of her, he accidentally causes a virus to bug up her code. If anything happens, like if they have to restart the world in Lyoko to deactivate Xana, she'll disappear for good. So of course Xana attacks. This episode is really focused on the characters and does not focus on exactly what Xana is doing, just that Xana is attacking. And you'd think that'd be really frustrating, but the writing is good and covers for it. It's less that Xana is a threat, so much as that Xana as a threat causes an even bigger threat of losing Aelita. They do end up saving Lyoko, and Jeremy is working the entire time on trying to get a code to like fix this bug, and in like the last minute he's like, I've done it, and he puts it in, and it doesn't work. And Aelita still chooses to go in and deactivate Xana, knowing that she'll disappear, and she says a very sad goodbye, and then they have to restart. So the whole group is kind of left just like sad, and Jeremy is like totally torn up. And then it's Yumi actually who has the idea. She's like, wait, you still have a strand of her hair. Can you re-virtualize her with the hair? So they try it and it works. And Aelita doesn't remember anything that's happened in this last episode, but it's a happy ending. It's another like really angsty one, but it's one that where like the Yumi angsty one is like just pure angsty. This one has so much heart to it, and it's a great episode. Okay, like I said, there were a couple episodes that I wanted to talk about more in depth. I think they just highlight a lot in particular about the show that I think we can talk a lot about them. The first one is the pilot, or not the pilot, but the premiere episode, Teddy Godzilla. This episode, I want to talk about like the filmmaking aspect of it. It's a really interesting introduction, in a large part because we're not introduced to it through any of the main characters, but through Millie and Tamia. They're the characters that we kind of focalize through for the first half of the episode. And I thought that was like risky but really wonderful because we're able to see the group dynamics of our main characters without really getting any of that undercurrent. We don't know everything about like Lyoko and everything, but we get a feeling that they're this really strong group and like who they are to each other. And then we get these two younger characters who they have such a mundane goal that then compared to the threat of Xana is not like less valuable as a goal, but just like so different. And it really highlights how risky and how mature our main characters actually have to be in the face of all this. We do obviously get to know the group pretty well, and we do follow them but around the halfway point is kind of when the perspective switches to be more strongly about our main characters, Lyoko warriors, is when there's like a switch there, and then we start following them more closely like we do throughout the rest of the episodes. But I just thought that was a really nice way to open us to this world, especially because the first episode is not an origin story, which you'd probably notice because I literally just got through explaining all of the episodes. But the episode 1 is not an origin story, and throughout the whole series, or throughout the whole season I should say, they kind of drop information to you. I think they do a very good job of catching you up to speed on just the nitty-gritty details without just info dumping. That's one of the reasons there is such a strong pattern in the episodes, because the origin story doesn't actually come around until I think season 4. I've seen the origin story episode. That's actually one of my favorites. It's so well done and it's so interesting, and I love origin stories. I'm a sucker for it, so I cannot wait until we can talk about that. It also, that episode in general was just like really great for characters, but the first episode has to explain enough without explaining everything and feeling info dumpy, and this episode does a really good job of it. I'm gonna just like insert a bunch of clips to kind of show you how they drop the information to the viewer without being overwhelming, and it's just really well done.
Aelita, this is Jeremy. Do you read me? Aelita? Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How about you? Okay. I didn't see anything unusual around the towers. It all seems quiet. Well, for the moment. I'm making progress with my research, so you can come and live with us. The key to materialization? You found it at last? Well, no, not yet, but I'm working on it. It's just a matter of time. Then Xana won't be able to do anything to harm you or us. That's great, thanks.
What do you say we take a look to make sure that our old friend Xana isn't behind this?
Teddy bear?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
He's always there when you least expect him.
Okay, guys, who goes and who stays here?
We can't have a solo mission. It's too dangerous without Yumi. If you go alone, you never know what you're gonna find over there.
I volunteer.
What did I just say, huh?
Well, have you got any other ideas? There have been 2 accidents. We can't leave the school unguarded. And even going back in time, if there's an accident, it's all over.
It's definitely risky that they waited so long to tell the origin story, but by just jumping into the thick of it, I think we as viewers actually benefit a lot more from it, because it's not like the middle of their journey. Like, they're still pretty early on in learning everything. Obviously they haven't de-virtualized Aelita, and they're not like pros in Lyoko, so we do get to see a lot of their growth throughout the series, and we see a lot of growth, especially in Lyoko, and they're like fighting and everything in this season. But it's nice to have this like in media res beginning, and we get to know the characters while they're in the like high points of their struggle against Xana. It's also like that, like I said, this is a French show, and it is so clearly not an American show just based on this episode alone. I'm pretty sure that Cartoon Network ended up censoring pieces of the show, and I think that Cartoon Network actually didn't show certain episodes because of censorship things. But yeah, they don't care as much about like showing skin of characters, and I don't want to say like sexualizing them because I don't think that's what they're doing at all. I think it's just like, oh yeah, women wear like a bra and panties, and why don't these like animated characters? Like, of course they do, you know? So this episode, and there's this funny joke about a cold shower in a later episode that, yeah, there's just this, you can clearly tell, like, once you know it's not an American show, it makes so much more sense that it's not an American show. Episode 6, Cruel Dilemma. Yeah, this is, like, definitely the angst-heavy episode. I think that's just why I wanted to talk about it more. Alright, Cruel Dilemma. Like I said, this one is one that I remembered vividly from my childhood. It was probably one of my first serious interactions with like an angst-based story. I remembered it looking a little better. This is definitely one of the episodes with some of the really crappy 3D animation, and that kind of made it a little more disconnecting for me as a viewer now, because I was like, oh god. I think this is the first episode that really cements the show as being a serious show. Obviously, there are episodes and moments prior to this, like episode 2. Yeah, episode 2, where they're dealing with like nuclear holocaust possibilities. But this is the first one that brings it to a very personal level, a personal and serious level for the characters. I mean, it's really dark. We have like a lot of, you know, different things going on. We have the fact that Aelita could be materialized and then gives it up, and they have hope that there will be a way to materialize her a different way. They can't guarantee it. And then we have Yumi, who falls into the digital sea, the digital void, and literally dies. And the episode is very clear about that. There's like a brief mourning period, and the fact that there's a reset and there's no Yumi, like that's very different from everything that the show had set up until this point. And it's a little shocking, too. I mean, it's shocking. You've just killed off a character. But it's particularly shocking because prior to this episode, we didn't know what the consequences of Lyoko were. So this is 6 episodes into this series, which is not that far. This series has around 100 episodes, so it's not a short series. This is very quick into its runtime. But prior to this point, we as viewers didn't get to know or see what the consequences for the Lyoko warriors might be in Lyoko. Obviously, if they get all their life points taken away, they devirtualize and end up back in the real world, and they can't go back to Lyoko until it's reset. But we never really saw anything permanent. And one of my issues with the show, which I'll talk about in a little more depth in just a few minutes, is that there don't feel to be a lot of consequences for the characters on the show because of the time reset. This episode makes it front and center the consequences for everybody. So it's a big episode in that way as well. I think this episode also is really important because it just highlights who Aelita is as a character. Obviously, we've gotten to know her before this point. She's been around for 6 episodes. But this is the first episode where it's very clear that while she is motivated to become devirtualized and enter the real world, she cares a lot more about the humans who are helping her. She has a lot of empathy and compassion as a character, and this episode really lets it shine through. She's very self-sacrificing and not in a frustrating way, in a very much a hopeful way. And I think it just highlights how much of a light she is on this show and how integral she is to the show. Obviously, she's important for the plot, but no one else in the group really carries around this much hope. She's the one who drives the hope factor for everybody. And I don't want to trivialize that. Without her, the show would probably miss a lot of heart. And without her, the show probably would not be worth watching because otherwise it's kind of depressing. Okay, image problem. I really, really love this episode because another Aelita-centric thing, she actually gets to be a bit more offensive in this one. She's often relegated to a very defensive position. She doesn't have any powers or attacks or weapons or anything, so she really is just a character that's being protected and herded around Lyoko. And while she's incredibly important to Lyoko and to deactivating Vanna, she's never really doing anything actively, which for me as a viewer is incredibly frustrating. That was an issue I was having with season 1 of the show until we get to this episode. She doesn't get upgraded or anything. She's still the same doesn't have any real powers in form of like attacking, although she can defend herself. She's able to like make pieces of Lyoko grow or whatever. But this is the first episode where we really get to see her be her and do her thing and actually accomplish quite a bit. She does a lot of sneaking around on Lyoko. She gets almost past Xana's monsters, finds out what is happening with Yumi, and does it all because she's smart and fast, but because she also like is persistent. This episode really like struck me because none of the other characters have to spend prolonged time in Lyoko. And while she does have some help in, you know, staying in Lyoko and that they're protecting her whenever they go there, she's there for a lot longer than they are, and she's constantly protecting herself and surviving. And this episode just like highlighted for me just how strong of a character she is. And I don't think that this show is very obvious about making Aelita a strong character in season 1. She's, like I said, talking about the last episode, the heart, the empathy of the show. But this episode doubles down on that and reminds you that those are both really, really strong characteristics and qualities. And I think this is one of the episodes where the show really shines because of it. This is also the first episode where Xana does anything with like humans, as in like making a human, which is very creepy and very scary and really shows the lengths to which Xana can and will go. This is more important later on in the series. There's a character who's introduced to, not going to spoil it here, but it's important later on in the series and later seasons. But just in general, the fact that this early in the show, Xana is granted the ability to like make a clone of someone, albeit a very imperfect one. I think that's just great seeding of things that are going to happen much later as the series progresses. One of the things that I tie into Aelita not being a very offensive character is just the limits of the animation in Lyoko. For a lot of the first half of these episodes that I'm talking about today, the animation is garbage, and that really limits what they can do with the characters. Once there's like an upgrade to the animation, you can also see that there is quite an upgrade to how many characters are moving at once, for example, or just, you know, how they're moving and what direction they're going. A lot of the very early episodes have the animation focus on just them moving around and like running from locations. They do fighting, obviously, but the focus is not on like the fighting, it's on getting from A to B. So there'll be extended moments of like two characters running to meet each other, just because the show hasn't figured out how to do the rest of the animation yet, basically. They're still working on it. And this is also, and I think that's why once the animation starts getting better, they start giving Aelita more to do and showing more of her. So that does definitely tie into her finally being able to be more active in the show. I just thought that was interesting that on like a meta level, she is very intrinsically tied into Lyoko in this way, in a way that like the other characters are, but she was quite a bit prevented from actually like doing things until they were able to get better technology to let her do things. I just think that's interesting. This episode is also the one to really shake up the mold. It starts in Lyoko, and not a lot of episodes start that way. They tend to start really grounded in the real world. And in fact, I think by starting in Lyoko, the episode just immediately, it feels more exciting from the get-go. Especially coming off an episode previously where Yumi died in Lyoko, and having her being the one to start off in Lyoko just like has like a ghost of a memory into it kind of aspect. So I really liked that. I thought it was a really smart way to play it off, and I really liked that Lyoko, this episode, by starting in Lyoko, shows that not every time they go there is showcased. Like, they'll go there other times. Maybe there's smaller occasions. And this show is highlighting the major occurrences. Alright, and then the mid-season finale, episode 13, Just in Time. This is probably the best episode at this point. It has easily the best writing. This episode is also just, like, in general, like, perfect. The editing is really good, which is something that the show does slip up on a lot. The voice acting is fantastic. The Lyoko animation is steps above where it started the season. And just all around, it's a fantastic episode. Really, the only like technical error I caught, and this is a major one, so I'm kind of sad it slipped through, but Ulrich's voice is coming out of Yumi's body at one point, and I had to pause it because I was laughing so hard.
I hope he finds the right solution before Xana attacks again. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
But other than that, which, yes, is a major issue, other than that, the show is, or this episode is just fantastic. And it really shows that when they get to take the time on an episode, they can really shine. I mentioned in sort of the like quick run through that this episode doesn't really focus on what Xana is doing and actually just kind of like skirts over that completely, just that Xana is attacking in the real world. And I really liked that because a lot of the episodes focus almost too much on the detail. Not the, like, details that make sense, but, like, the detail of Xana's attack. Like, the episode with the rats, we get a very extended opening sequence where we see the rats being infected and then infecting other rats. And while that's, like, great, it is very much just, like, a time filler. And this episode did not have time for anything like this. This episode was more like, Xana is a threat. Xana is always a threat, but we're going to focus on the characters, which I always think is more interesting than focusing on Xana and Xana's attacks. Like the episode where Yumi dies, this one also has the weighty death of a character going on, because Aelita does sacrifice herself at the end. She says goodbye, the characters mourn, everyone is torn up until they realize that they can bring her back, but it's a heavy death. It's not just like oh, she died, we can bring her back. It's a very permanent feeling moment. Obviously, we know it's not going to be permanent. She's a core member of the show, but it feels permanent. This show, when it allows itself to get into those serious matters, really does a good job of making you feel like the character actually died and not just like it's a cartoon and the character is easy enough to bring back. So extra applause for that. Oh, another thing that the show does quite frequently is that, like, last minute, oh my god, we're not gonna save them, oh phew, we saved the day kind of thing. There are, like, challenges. There's the episode where Aelita has to choose between two towers, and she chooses one, and she's like, oh no, I chose wrong. And then, like, literally with, like, 2 seconds to spare, she's like, oh no, wait, it is the right one. Like, it gets kind of gimmicky after a while. Actually, very quickly. It didn't take long to get gimmicky. This episode, and I think this is partly why it shines as an ending, this episode makes you think that at the very last minute, they've done it. That Jeremy has saved Aelita and she won't be deleted. And then it pulls the carpet out from under you and is completely different from every other last minute save. And it's like, no, he didn't. That's not what happened. He failed again. She's dead. She's gone. And I don't know if they were intentionally building up for this moment to subvert expectations like that. I will say that as the series progresses, they still have a lot of those motifs of just last minute saving the day, but they're not, at least in the second half of the season, they aren't as overdone in a lot of ways. So it could have been that they were building up to subvert the expectations there, and if so, you did a fantastic job because the emotions really do land with it. But I feel like they weren't. I feel like it just kind of happened that way and they took advantage of the situation. But I did want to talk about that because the show, like most shows, I shouldn't say that, like a lot of shows, when it is able to subvert the expectations, and I hate that phrase when used in conjunction with Game of Thrones, let's just be clear, but when a show successfully manages to subvert expectations in a way that still fulfills the story as it needs to be fulfilled, it's a really great way of storytelling, and this show lands so well with it. It's able to really have these huge, weighty moments because it understands what it's trying to tell. And it lets itself do things to the characters that are permanent, or as permanent as it can get for the show. That's it for, like, the in-depth episodes I wanted to go into. I've talked a lot about the difference in the Lyoko animation quality, and this is another time where it's hard to explain. I'm just going to, like, show you, like, parts from, like, the early episodes, and then episodes like 12 and 13. The upgrading quality of 3D animation is incredible, and honestly, it just keeps improving over time, though I think the greatest leap is between the 1st and 13th episodes. I think after that, it just, like, slowly gets better, but it's like a joy to actually watch now, and yeah, I'm so glad because I was worried that the really bad animation style was going to last. I don't even think it's a style, I just think it's the equipment they were using, but I was really worried it was going to last like the entire first season, and I was like, I don't know if I can take that, because it's really hard to look at. It's really hard to look at. In general, though, I really do like this show. it has a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but it has faults, and most of them are technical. Obviously the animation in early episodes, but also the editing and sometimes the voice work. But I think it's more about the editing. A lot of times it seems like characters are responding to things that, like, they've been given the wrong cues, or responses have been edited out of order. I don't know if there's a translation issue, or if really there's like scenes that have been edited into the wrong order, or reactions that have been put in the wrong places. But it can get really distracting. This is something that the show gets better at, or maybe I'm just becoming immune to noticing. But it's frustrating, especially for a show that I think very highly of, to have all these quality issues with it. You can kind of tell that either it was cheaply made, or there wasn't a lot of care put into filling up scenes with other characters. There are moments where there's just like no other students in the background, and you're like, well, there should be. That's not the biggest issue for me, but it is, again, just like kind of a frustrating technical issue. Like, I understand if it's like a money thing, that's a little more acceptable, but if it was a didn't notice, didn't care so much thing, that's really frustrating. One thing that I'm glad they started taking advantage of, especially in, you can kind of notice that they take advantage of it closer to when they're building up to like big episodes, is when there's like a still shot that just the camera moves over and there's like still noises and voices. I actually really like that. That's something Studio Mir takes advantage of as well too. I mean, it works really well. And basically this happens, there might be a technical term for this kind of staging of a frame, but this happens because studios tend to work on multiple episodes at the same time, so they're devoting most of their resources to the bigger, more important episodes if they have to. And so sometimes they do this to kind of just make it a little easier on themselves. And I like it. I think it's actually pretty good trick to use, because oftentimes you get to focus a little more on the details of these scenes since you're looking at them a little longer, or details of these images since you're looking at them a little longer. And like, it's a neat animation trick. It's something that you can't really get with live action, and I think it just adds a specific texture to some scenes. So I like that they started taking advantage of that. I haven't seen it since those episodes though, so I hope that they start taking advantage of it again if they need to. Like I said, Studio Mir takes advantage of it. I'll see if I can try to pull a clip from like Voltron where they do that, but it's very hard to pull clips from that show because it's on Netflix. I just think it's nice when they do that. Another major issue I have with the show is consequences for characters. Because they are able to reset every episode, and by resetting kind of redo moments and redo like a bad decision, they don't really suffer any consequences for it. And I wish they would, because it's great that they learned that they did like a bad thing or made a bad decision or a bad thing happened. Like, it's great that they learned that, but they learned it on such a surface level and they don't really get to grow from it. They just know, oh, don't make that exact decision. And I think that's why they kind of continue to be jerks to Sissy as the series continues, because they really haven't learned not to. So I'm not like defending Sissy. She's obviously not like a good person character. She's not a bad person though. She is a kid. She's like 13 years old. And her motivations are kind of sad. She wants to be a part of their group. Like, she makes it very clear. She says multiple times that she just wants to be a part of their group and asks if she can be a part of their group, and they just hate her. And she's definitely a brat and spoiled and annoying and mean, but they hate her. There is an episode, and I think it's in this first half of the season, there's an episode where Ulrich is like, Sissy, if we get out of here, I promise to be nicer to you. And actually he is after that. Like, she doesn't remember that any of it happened because it resets, but he is actually nicer to her after that. There's still like they're still not like, he still like teases her, but he's much nicer to her afterwards, and I did like that. But in general, there just aren't consequences for the characters. They don't grow through making mistakes. Like, they don't have to deal with the fallout of things. They just know, oh, that was a bad thing, but they don't really understand why. And because I mean, I'm not going to say because of that the characters don't grow at all, but I just think it stifles the characters quite a bit, and it stifles the viewers quite a bit, because while there is hardship in the show, obviously, a lot of the mundane hardship just doesn't exist for the characters. Yeah, I think the show is a lot weaker for it. I don't really know how they would get around it unless they reset time. Like, that's kind of important to preventing Xana's attacks from becoming like a mainstream thing that everyone knows about. But I wish there was, maybe not another way, but like sometimes they didn't reset to the past. Like maybe they only use that in extreme cases or something. But yeah, it's really frustrating that they don't get to learn from their mistakes in that way. Another issue with the show is, I guess, I don't know if it's an issue so much as like, I think the show would be stronger if they did it a different way. There aren't a lot of side characters. They don't introduce a lot of other students, and while they do name some and give some, well, they don't even give anyone really like much in the way of personalities. Sometimes they'll just throw a name out there so that they can be like talking about another student in passing, but yeah, there isn't much depth to other students or side characters, and it's a shame because this world, I think, would feel so much larger if we got to know even a couple more students or just more characters in general. Later in the show, they do introduce a couple more characters, and that does help a little bit, but they never go all the way with just like making there be a lot of characters. I think part of that might be because they feel like if they were going to start introducing a lot of student characters, they'd have to be friends with our main characters or friends with Sissy. If they were friends with our main characters, they would probably have to end up knowing about Lyoko or going to Lyoko. And I think the show is pretty good at strictly regulating who goes to Lyoko and who knows about it. And I don't think that they wanted to mess with that, which I do understand. I don't think that there's a lot of room for other characters to start going to Lyoko, but I still think there are ways to introduce characters and get to know maybe other side characters without making them go to Lyoko. For example, the episode where they introduced Talia, like she's just around for that episode, and it is so frustrating because she really would have complicated the show in an interesting way. Even if they just kept her for like 2 more episodes and did like a little trilogy of episodes with her, like it would have been interesting to have that extra character hanging around. Those are my major issues with the show. I honestly, they're some of that, they're kind of big, but they're not enough for me to dislike the show or think the show is like worthless or something for it. The show definitely grows into itself. It starts strong, but it continues to grow into itself, which is really nice. I love this show. I've been trying to pinpoint exactly why. There's definitely this like glaze of nostalgia covering the whole thing for me, but I've been trying to find like specific reasons why I love the show, and I think a major part is the characters. I really care about all of them. The show does a good job working to make you, it's not even working, the show just does a good job of making you like our main characters and making them like each other. There's a really great dynamic in the group where everyone is legitimately friends, and it doesn't have to be pushed, like it's not like forced. It's like, yeah, they work as a friend group. They feel like they would be a friend group. I think the aspect of going to Lyoko also is something I just love. The idea of going into the digital world to like fight monsters, I think it's a lot of fun. I'm just gonna be real, it's fun. There's also this like magical girl element to it because they do get like costumes when they go to Lyoko, and I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. And obviously the angst. I love angst. Angst stories are my bread and butter, 100%. I think that's really it. Like, yeah, I've tried to put it into words a couple times now what exactly it is I like about the show, but I just like so much of the show that it's hard to be like, I like this and this and this and this, because I like everything except for those things that I mentioned that I thought were problems. Obviously, that's not a great way to review it, but this isn't exactly reviewing the show. This is me just sharing with you. One of my favorite shows. So yes, do not forget to subscribe if you want to make sure that you get the next episode of this series. I will be doing a total of 9, and the next episode is going to be the rest of season 1, which season 1 is a lot, I think the second half is a lot stronger than the first half. So it'll be really exciting to talk about that. And yeah, this episode, or this video, has taken a lot of filming and editing, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I had a lot of fun going back and watching it. It's like a lot of times the best part of my day was watching episodes of the show because I just love it so much and it's so fun to return to. And like I said, you can definitely watch the show. Watch along with me if you're interested. But you can definitely watch the show. It's on YouTube as well as on Amazon Prime. And on YouTube it's free and it's up there legally and everything. So yeah, if you're worried about that, don't be. It's totally legit. Goodbye V, goodbye everyone else. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I have enjoyed doing it. And I'm going to bow you out with the most cringy music from the show.
Goodbye.
Okay, hit it.